The Locked On Podcast Network presents the NBA Big 3 in 30. The 3 biggest stories in the NBA from our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The NBA Big 3 in 30 starts now with the biggest story in the NBA.
The Oklahoma City Thunder fall to the Milwaukee Bucks in the NBA Cup Championship.
You are Locked On Thunder, your daily Oklahoma City Thunder podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We're diving into the Oklahoma City Thunder falling to the Milwaukee Bucks 97-81 in the NBA Cup Championship, in a game in which the Thunder struggled mightily. Many sweeping overreactions and underreactions. We'll talk about where everything should level off at after this game. An important note off the top, this game, of course, does not count in the regular season standings. It does not count in the players' individual statistics. It does not count, period, except for the Bucks now being crowned the NBA Cup champions, and the Bucks players having more additional money than Oklahoma City players will get for winning the Cup. Now, with all that being said, this game has already and will continue to cause a stir both locally and nationally. Locally meaning like every Thunder fan around the world seemingly is hyperfixated on this game and kind of the reactions to it. And then nationally, this was a showcase game for the Thunder where they get a few and far between national TV game and a game in which the entire NBA world is watching. The only game in town, and they did not play to their standard in this game. However, that does not mean that it's an indictment on this Thunder's roster, or it has to come with sweeping generalizations. It also doesn't mean you can just kind of push it under the rug. And so we're always going to try to find the middle ground, and that's where we're going to start today. First and foremost, before you get into the weeds of things, which we will, as we do on this show, like we go into the weeds, we go deep down into the roots, not just surface level at Locked On Thunder. But the first and foremost thing is you're not going to win games. When Shea puts up 21 points on 33% shooting and J-Dub puts up 18 points on 40% shooting, the buck stops there. You're just not going to win games that way. And yes, that's a ton of pressure to put on those two guys. That's what happens when you're a superstar and a rising star, respectively. And when this roster is tailor-made for your offense. Like whenever Shea is your offensive engine the entire time he's on the floor, whenever J-Dub has to carry the offense in staggered lineups, it comes down to how those guys played. And those guys did not play well tonight. You tip your cap to Milwaukee. Andre Jackson was awesome against SGA. Andre Jackson was lethal against Shea. And the Bucks, as we mentioned on both pods this week, Monday and Tuesday, when we previewed this game, the recipe for success, what was it? You had to get your three-point shot falling and loosen up this Milwaukee defense. And did not happen. 5 for 32, 15% from three. You had to adjust to a style of team that has given you trouble historically. Really, for as good as the Thunder have been, it's been the only style of basketball that's hurt the Thunder, is whenever teams can pack the paint effectively and be really physical with you. When you can be physical and put a body on J-Dub, he very much struggles as a scorer. Check, it happened tonight. When you can pack the paint and really harass SGA inside the arc, he struggles. That's the only time he struggles. Now, he typically does not struggle to this degree. As a matter of fact, this game plan from the Bucks defensively, very similar to the Mavericks game plan, where Shea was the best player on the floor by a mile. He was not even close to the best player on the floor in this game, as Giannis and Dame both played really well, and Giannis was awesome. So that's where it all stops. And we will still get into what a lot of the other aspects of this game that is driving Thunder fans crazy. But for all the overreactions, for all the takes, for all the complaints, it starts and stops with those two guys. Just as for Dallas and for other teams, it starts and stops with their top two guys. This is a star-driven league, and your stars did not play good enough tonight. And those were the two biggest missing ingredients from the path to victory, the keys to the game. We laid them out on Thunder and SI. We laid them out on this crossover with Locked On Bucks. We laid it out on Monday with Michael Martin. You had to shoot the ball well, and you did not. Because defensively, you really checked all the boxes. Yes, AJ Green shook loose for 3 for 5, and he hit timely shots. Gary Trent Jr. hit timely shots. Brook Lopez hit timely shots. The Bucks took your game plan, made it their own, and won the game. Because Giannis is a walking 32 and 14 guy. Tonight, he had 26 points and 19 rebounds and 10 assists with 2 steals and 3 blocks. Like, you held Giannis under 30 points. And he had some clean looks, and he shot 52% from the floor. Guess what? That's life playing Giannis. Like, Giannis is never going to play a game in which he does not overpower you at times and just will himself to open shots. Dame went 5 for 10 from 3. He put in 23 points overall, and you held Milwaukee to 97 points. This is the first time all year that the Thunder have lost a game in which their opponent did not crack 100 points. Now, that stat still remains intact for Thursday because this game does not count against those records, but it still is saying you did everything on that end of the floor and nothing, respectively, offensively. 2 of your worst scoring quarters of the season came in the third and fourth quarter. When you went to halftime, you were down by 1. It was a big win for this team to only be down by 1 point for as porous as they shot. And then they ran off the floor. It was a non-competitive game in the second half because you did not get what you needed to get from your top 2 guys. We're going to give Isaiah Hartenstein a ton of love on this show. When he's arguably your best player, when that's even a debate that he's your best player on the floor, you're not going to win games against anyone, much less a Milwaukee Bucks team that's very capable. Like, they're a top 3 team in the East. Of any team not named Boston, it's either them or Cleveland with the second best chance out East. And you can pick apart Cleveland with their small guards and how you think that translates to the playoffs. But nonetheless, that's what it is. And the Thunder, I think, still benefited from playing in this game. It doesn't count in the standings. It creates a 3 games in 4 nights with a back-to-back. I promise you, if the NBA Cup didn't exist and they didn't play this 83rd game, you would still play 3 games in 4 nights right now. Because that's the nature of playing a back-to-back. When you schedule an Orlando and Miami back-to-back, you're going to play 3 games in 4 nights. And so the NBA kind of held off on scheduling a weekend game in case they were going to be in the NBA Cup game. So now you get 2 days off in the back end of this back-to-back instead of just 1, or vice versa. Now you play 1 game on the front end instead of none. It still helps the Thunder out to play this extra game because you got to see it again in a live atmosphere where both teams really wanted to win. You got to see your kryptonite on display. And these teams that can get really physical on the outside and effectively pack the paint, not just do it to do it, not just put bodies down there, but effectively deter you at the rim, where the Thunder had to throw their hands up at times and not even go to the rim. The teams that can do that, like Dallas, like Milwaukee, are the teams that will directly give every iteration of this Thunder team with 2 go-to scorers who do it from inside the arc fits until they learn how to handle more physical matchups. And so when those 2 guys are not hitting to their standards, and frankly not hitting at all, and as a team you shot 5 for 32 from 3, bingo, that's your loss, and there's no real need to further it. And I think that the fear factor is, well, you just saw a whole playoff series against Dallas where this was their MO, and this is what kind of held them up. And not much look changed against Milwaukee in this game, the highest stakes game you've played since that Dallas series last summer. It's important to note that this team is still a young team. And I get it. 90% of the audience just rolled their eyes right now at that statement. I understand it. Because I've been telling you, and everyone else has been telling you, that this is the youngest team in the NBA for a half decade. And it doesn't make any sense. But it's still a fact. Like, factually speaking, the Thunder are still the youngest team in the NBA. And to quantify that and not just give you their age, go look up Dame and Giannis's basketball reference page, click on their career playoff logs, and see that they've played in twice as many big games as any single person on this Thunder team has played. That's a team that knows how to win, that's been in big spots before, and was able to execute their game plan. So I don't think it's an indictment on the Thunder. I don't think it's something where, they're going to struggle in May because of what happened here, right? But it is another opportunity for you to see how this version of OKC deals with the same problems that it had a year ago. And there's the other kicker. Let's not forget that to get here, you had to beat Houston and Dallas, 2 teams who are Dallas, who everyone going into that game said that they had your number, and some still believe that they have your number because PJ did not play in that game. And then Houston, who's the second best defense in the NBA and was capable of muddying up the game defensively and hurting your offense, and you still won that game pretty convincingly down the stretch with a third quarter run of your own. It's just that third quarter run never came.
Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only the incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more near you. You can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime.
Dennis Schroder has touched down in the Bay. He has practiced with the team ahead of...
You are Locked On Warriors, your daily Golden State Warriors podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Today's all about Dennis Day in the Bay. Schroder usually wears 17. It's because he was the 17th pick and his late father's favorite number. Obviously, Chris Mullin, he cannot wear 17, so he's going to flip it around. Schroder will wear 71. Sounds like he's picked up things really well in practice, and his role will be to play all the non-Steph Curry minutes and start and finish the game with Steph Curry. I'll give you the floor here. I've spoken on what I think Schroder brings to the table, and it's a very good start because to bury all this, it's waiting in the weeds, ready to pounce. I said it the entire offseason because I was in the camp that the Warriors have just not had good enough players. They need to go out and get someone. This is the start. This is where you give yourself a pulse, you give yourself a chance to evaluate, and we'll see what the market turns into down the road. They have time now. They do this before Christmas. It's huge.
Yeah, Chuck, I completely agree with that. And it's something that we talked about on the show 3 weeks ago, right? When D'Anthony Melton first went down, and we talked about not necessarily the elite NBA player that D'Anthony Melton is, but the quality two-way player that he is and the role he played on the Warriors and what he meant to this team. And after that injury, I had said that it's a huge loss for the Warriors. That's why we're losing games. And, people eviscerated me in the comments. People told me I'm delusional. They don't know what I'm talking about. But, I keep receipts. And I think if we can, God forbid that we let facts get in the way of a good argument here, Chuck. But since that injury, prior to D'Anthony Melton getting hurt, while he missed games sporadically here and there, I'll acknowledge that there's a little bit of nuance here in this analysis. But we were 10-2. All right, that's an 83% win percentage. I'll run the numbers quick. Since then, we are 4-9, a 31% win percentage. I'm not necessarily saying or implying that correlation implies causation, or I shouldn't jump to say that. But I think we can easily correlate the fact that ever since we lost our starting shooting guard in D'Anthony Melton, that the Warriors' quality of play and consistency of play and style of play has really taken a hit. And we've seen instances of when the team, going back to what, I've harped on this a lot. I feel like a broken record to a degree, but about that identity. And there were instances where we were able to demonstrate that, right? Like when we beat Minnesota and we saw the Warriors take them down. I mean, that's a tough team. It's one of the better teams in the West, regardless of whether or not they're 14-11. They're still figuring things out. But there are times when we were able to get back to a brand of basketball that was winning the Warriors games at those first 12 games of the year. But losing Melton really created a huge hole in the lineup. And like we talked about previously of the fundamental construction of the roster, then you're naturally going to start Podziemski. But now the indication of bringing in Schroder is exactly what we talked about previously, the fact that they're doing that to fill that gap that was created when Melton was injured. And so what Schroder brings is the ability to create his own shot, to get to the hoop. We've talked about this too, you and I, and as well with Carrie on the airwaves. It's a matter of looking at archetypal players and not necessarily an individual, precise look of something, like a Zach LaVine specifically or Jimmy Butler specifically, but a type of player that can create their own shot, that can get to the hoop, that can knock down jumpers, that can do that independently. And that's something that I think Schroder brings to the team. We've seen our fourth quarter scoring has been a challenge as of late for the Warriors. And so I think bringing him in gives us that ability. Like you talked about just now, the pesky defender. I think a way to say that as well is he's just competitive. He competes. Dennis doesn't care if he's rotating on a switch and there's a 7-footer there. He's going to play physical and he's going to do what he can to disrupt the play. And so I think on both ends, you're getting a veteran presence. You're getting a guy who wants to get out there and compete, that wants to play on both ends of the floor. And that provides the Warriors something that the team lost with the injury to Melton, is that player who can create off the bounce, can shoot the three, can create for others. We look at the numbers, it's all there. Don't let facts get in the way of a good argument. I think it's a perfect signing, or a perfect trade, I should say, and a great way to replace what we lost when Melton went down.
You add another player to the mix, and this was a team that was running 12 deep at points. And I haven't looked at all the rotations over the last couple of weeks, but it naturally has been reduced. Obviously, Melton, Moses Moody's missed a couple of games. We haven't seen as much Kyle Anderson as I would have liked, man. Let's weave that in for 2 seconds before we get back into this entire argument, because Kyle Anderson, I think he's really good, and I think he should be seeing more 20-plus minute nights than he has been. Why do you think he hasn't?
I think it's, again, when you think about the way the roster is constructed right now, without having another guy out there that can really create his own shot or command.
Do you think this helps Anderson maybe?
I think it helps Anderson. I think we're going to see more of Kyle now, because that enables you to, when you take Steph off the floor, but then you have Schroder out there who can create his own shot, it enables you to play with someone like a Kyle Anderson. It wouldn't surprise me if we even see some Kyle and Draymond minutes at the same time, mixed in with Steph, Schroder, then throw in a Wiggins or a Kuminga there, because you have two shooters. You can have a little bit of spacing. And Draymond this year too, I mean, again, he's shooting the three ball well. I mean, he in that Mavs game, he made 5 out of 9, I think it was, right? And so he's shooting the ball. He's still not going to command, the attention of a defense in the way that these other players do, but he can still he's proven his ability to knock it down at a high clip, dating back to last season when he managed to stay on the floor. And so, I think we're going to see some more Kyle. I think just having another player that can really create off the bounce creates more opportunity for a player like Kyle to contribute in a meaningful way.
So who do we see less of? Because the rotation was obviously thick in general. Lindy Waters is now back into the mix. You go 4 or 5 games without seeing Lindy, and it's like, there he goes. He can still play basketball. He's good. Pat Spencer gets his minutes here and there. I know we haven't seen it as much lately. You would have to assume that at some point, although it sounds like Moses Moody's doubtful for Thursday's game against Memphis, he is going to be back on this team, or at least back in the lineup in full uniform playing. I thought naturally it kind of pushes Brandon Bachemski, who's struggled a little bit, probably hasn't earned the minutes he's been playing this season. I mean, I don't think he's been as bad as some people. Get rid of him, cut his ass. He's terrible. I don't think he's been that bad. I don't think he's been someone, though, that deserves 31 minutes a game, which he has seen multiple times during this losing streak. I would think that, Schroder kind of replaces a lot of those minutes. However, it sounds like Steve Kerr is going to push Brandon Bachemski into the shooting guard position. It wasn't fair to put him, as a facilitator, and he plays better off ball, to which a lot of people on Warriors Reddit says he plays better off court. So, I mean, touche to that one there. But, how does this mix things up? Because once again, we got the maestro, Steve Kerr, pulling the strings. Not an easy job to do. You now have a rotation, to me, that I think can be shortened with Schroder. I mean, that's what this allows you to do. It allows you to give Schroder 30 minutes and quit going with 18, 20, 22 minutes a night. 5 different players doing that.
Definitely. I mean, I think we're going to see Schroder chew up a lot of minutes. I think, I mean, Pat Spencer, he's a fun story. What an awesome, commitment to the game and an ability to make your way to the NBA after playing lacrosse in college. But I mean, ultimately, Pat Spencer's a two-way player for a reason, right? And so I think we're going to see a lot less of Pat Spencer in the future. Ideally, on the discussion of a Lindy or a Moses Moody coming off the bench, ideally, if I could have it my way, I would like to see more of Moody, simply from the standpoint of develop the young talent. You just signed him to a contract.
Paid him good money.
Yeah, might as well put him out there, right? Let him. I'd rather see Moses take up the minutes than Lindy. But then with regards to Bachemski, I mean, Schroeder's definitely going to chew into his minutes. I think that's a very good thing. And I think and the reason why I say that isn't just because Pods has been underperforming. I think the expectations, it alleviates pressure. Exactly. And it allows him to play more within his role and more, kind of allowing him to do what I think he's better at. And, we talked about this earlier this season, but kind of being the glue guy, because if anyone denies, okay, who's the first guy to hit the deck, it's Pods on any play. If anyone denies who's the guy that dives into the stands and, makes those crazy plays where he saves the ball and gives us an extra possession, he does those little things, right? And, those things are tough to quantify. But I'm not going to sit here and defend him when I say I think he's shooting, 25% from three? I mean, come on, that's abhorrent. You can't be getting burned as much as he has in the NBA, shooting 25% from three at the guard position. So I think we're going to see Schroder take up some of those minutes, but also, too, what I'm excited to see with Dennis is I think he's going to take up, honestly, some of Steph's minutes from the standpoint of that load management, right? I mean, Steph's been playing some more minutes, and we've been trying to, ride Steph as much as we can, which, he's our superstar, he's our guy, but ultimately he turns 37 in a couple months, and, you got to start finding ways to keep him engaged and allowing him to continue to impact the game in the unique way that he can with his gravity, with his ability to make shots and create for others. But having Dennis allows you to have someone that can, you can kind of have out there and create some offense for himself and others, and giving Steph extended periods to catch his breath, and hopefully we don't have to play him deep into the mid-30s frequently, right? Occasionally you're going to have to, but hopefully you don't have to do that a lot.
Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. And you can look at some early NFL lines. The Vikings are headed to the Pacific Northwest to face the Seahawks. FanDuel likes the Vikes by 3.5 points on the road. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
Trade rumors galore for the Nuggets.
You are Locked On Nuggets, your daily Denver Nuggets podcast.
The Athletic, it's Tony Jones, good friend of mine, Sam Amick, a really good friend of mine.
Yep.
Those two reported the following. As a result, the Nuggets have either expressed interest in or have had preliminary trade discussions on the following players: Chicago's Zach LaVine, Washington's Jordan Poole, Utah's Jordan Clarkson, Atlanta's DeAndre Hunter, Brooklyn's Cam Johnson, and Washington's Jonas Valanciunas. That's followed up by a report from Ian Begley, longtime Knicks reporter, who says, I've heard Brandon Ingram is another player among the group on their radar. Both of those have indicated, and this is like one of the things that just kind of happens, is like when everybody outside is like starts to pay attention to a situation, they're like, and you won't know this, but Michael Porter Jr. could be traded. While like our show has been like, yeah, no, if they're making a deal, it's almost definitely going to be Mike. Like It almost has to be, because they have no other options. It's the only trade asset that they have. Like we've talked about that for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. And we've argued about whether or not that's doable. And I continue to say that's going to be an issue, but we'll start here, Ryan.
Yeah.
Because the top of the list is Zach LaVine, who plays for the Chicago Bulls, whose general manager is Arturas Karnisovas, who used to work in Denver.
Yes,
so you've got a pre-existing relationship. Arturas is going to know and be comfortable with Mike's medicals. So that helps grease the wheels considerably for getting a deal done. There's a lot more trust there, at least on this issue, between those two sides, rather than potentially a different type of deal. So the question comes back to Zach LaVine, and you have a very strong take.
I do have a very strong take. And Zach LaVine reminds me of Aaron Gordon in a lot of different ways, where on an Eastern Conference team, a subpar team for a long time, in a very averse situation where the actual value of the player is sort of being misconstrued with the situation and how it has been in that way for a long time. Now, it is not just Chicago's fault. Zach LaVine's been hurt. Zach LaVine has not always put in the most effort on the defensive end. He can take some bad shots. He can do some things that rub you the wrong way as a fan. But in general, I think he's one of those guys that is supremely talented. That is a very, very high level basketball talent, scorer off the dribble, athletic, physical in the way that he can get downhill off of the dribble, can do a lot of different things on the wing, and is somebody that has never really been in a great situation for him offensively. I think that there are some really interesting fits that he could have in Denver, where playing with a guy like Nikola Jokic, somebody who is extremely gifted at getting guys going, putting them into positions to succeed, running the two-man game. Don't you think Zach LaVine would be really good in the two-man game next to Nikola Jokic? I think he would. And I think that there are folks out there that don't necessarily think that he could translate to a team like the Nuggets, that they don't necessarily have the best situation for him. I tend to think that's wrong. I tend to think that he would be great here, and the Nuggets would be more successful with him on the roster.
Not only that, but you think that this deal is not just a good deal, but you think it's going to happen.
I do think it's going to happen. That's not sourced. Let me just say that. This is me connecting the dots more than anything. Although I have heard, obviously, and there have been reports that the Nuggets have had interest in Zach LaVine for a long time. And let me just kind of circle back to this. Calvin Booth has never been quiet about when he wants somebody. The information often seems to get out there, Matt. It seems to get out there on a pretty consistent basis. Think about Deron Holmes as one example of that, where it's just no secret that what he wants to happen, he's not necessarily going to, he's going to telegraph it a little bit. I think that this is a situation where the Nuggets have put out there that they are interested in Zach LaVine. They would want Zach LaVine, and they would be they'd be fascinated about the idea of bringing in Zach LaVine to make this happen. And I think that as long as they could come up with the right assets, the right pieces to sort of facilitate the deal to be happening, I think that there's a very good chance that this gets done.
I disagree entirely on the idea that the Nuggets were the ones that put this out. Entirely. This is most often related to other GMs, one circling the, like, it's vultures circling because they know that Denver's desperate. Yeah. And you apply pressure by being like, they're looking at all these guys. Are you going to make a trade? 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 And everybody likes to chat. And there's certain connections I could make between the reporters in question. They've not told me this. I haven't texted or talked to Sam or Tony since they published the story, but like, there's stuff that makes sense if you just like connect a little bit. And like, I think the idea that the Nuggets put this out, I think the Nuggets were probably consulted and confirmed on these. I think they probably were like, yeah, we've had these conversations.
I mean, I doubt that they were the ones to put it out, Matt. That's not necessarily what I'm saying here. I'm just saying that, like, it's not like Calvin has hid his desires for certain players, and then other GMs tell reporters, okay, they like Deron Holmes, they like X, Y, and Z. They're trying to do this, they're trying to do that. Like that has happened for Denver for a long time. So it just wouldn't surprise me at all.
Okay. So Ryan's on record that it's going to happen and it's going to be great.
Okay. No.
What?
Okay. You can't just say you can't say I'm going to say it's going to happen. I think it's a strong possibility that it will happen. I told you in confidence, I think it's 55-45.
Is it likely? I'll ask this. Is it more likely to happen than not?
Okay. Now you're putting me on the spot here. No trade is ever more likely to happen than not. That is, okay. It's never more likely to happen than not. However, if there was one where Denver, and I've talked to you about this, a distressed asset, somebody where you have to take a chance on somebody, you have to put yourself into a vulnerable position. I think that this makes sense.